Hello for those that already joined and those that will join later. We will start with the webinar presentation. I'm Inigo Aristizabal, will be the host for this session and will hand over the microphone later on to the chair. So I will start with a brief introduction about MDPI, nutrients as a journal, and then introduce the webinar itself. So about MDPI, it's a pioneer in scholarly open access publishing. And it's a publisher that has been supporting academic communities since 1996. The headquarters are in Basel in Switzerland. And MDPI has the mission to foster open access scientific exchange in all forms and across all disciplines. There's 469 diverse and open access journals in total represented in the publisher, including 460 peer-reviewed journals and 9 conference journals. And these journals are supported by more than 115,000 academic experts that share the mission, the values, and the commitment to provide high-quality service to the authors publishing papers in our journals. So, about Nutrients as a journal, it's an international peer-reviewed open access forum for publishing studies related to human nutrition. And this includes manuscripts that are describing the outcomes of animal studies that have been or that have relevance to human health. And this is published semi-monthly online by MDPI. So during the webinar today, the different talks will present different cutoff points developed for deficiency, suboptimal status, and optimal vitamin status. And the speakers will also be talking about the benefits of optimal vitamin status for long-term health. So this is the program for the webinar today. In the introduction part right now, Professor Dr. Manfred Eggersdorfer, who is the chair of the session, will be giving the first talk. And then he will be introducing the different speakers. So the questions and answers part will be in the end of the third presentation. And later on, the chair will be giving a closing to the webinar. So this webinar comes after a special issue that it's kind of related to it, who is the special issue entitled Assessment of Vitamin Deficiency and Benefits of Vitamin Supplementation for Human Health. The guest editor is the chair of this session, of this webinar, Professor Dr. Manfred Eggersdorfer, and the deadline for submission of manuscripts to this special issue, it's set the 5th of November this year, 2025. So if you are interested in checking the special issue, or you would like to submit some paper to it or check what it's about, you have the link here as well. Important for you to know as well as attendees, if you have any kind of question for any of the attendees during their talks or after them, just post the different questions you have, mentioning the speaker who is or who will be directed to answer your question in the questions and answers part, and not in the chat box, because this way we will be able to manage all the questions and answers in this part of the display. So I'm introducing now the chair of the event, which is Professor Dr. Manfred Eggersdorfer. So he studied chemistry at the Technical University of Munich and earned his PhD in organic chemistry, focusing on the synthesis and characterization of unusual amino acids. After a postdoctoral position he held in Stanford University, he worked on isolating sterols from marine sources for potential contraceptive use. Later on, in 1999, he joined Roche as head of R&D vitamins, and later continued in this same role at DSM, working in different positions in this company until he retired in 2018. So he's been the chair for health aging at the University Medical Center of Groningen from 2013 to 2023, where he was teaching nutrition to medical students and is currently affiliated with various organizations. So his research focuses on the impact of inadequate micronutrient intake across the life cycle, particularly regarding long-term health and aging, and has authored numerous publications on vitamins, carotenoids, omega-3 fatty acids, nutraceuticals, and innovation in nutritional ingredients. So I'm handing over the microphone to our chair today for him to start his presentation.
Yes, thank you so much for this introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to chair this section. So let me start up my slides. If I can do this, I think you have to stop the slideshows, then I can put up my slides. Yes, here it should work. Ladies and gentlemen, vitamins are essential, as we know. And where is it? Yes, here is my presentation. And let me start with the first slide and saying I would like to address what is the vitamin intake and status compared to recommendations. I think this is important if we talk about the role of vitamins, which are essential ingredients or essential nutrients. And I would also address and try to answer the question, what is the impact of deficiency and an inadequate status of vitamins on health? Or turn it around, what is the benefit if you have an optimal intake and optimal status? What is the benefit for the individual as well as for the society? This slide looks complex and it demonstrates what is the role of micronutrients. They are essential. There is no life without them. And we can see there's a role for fat-soluble vitamins, there's a role for water-soluble vitamins, there's also a role for minerals as well as for trace minerals. And when we talk today of vitamins, I have to say, and I will focus on a few of the vitamins, however, we have to say that vitamins, or micronutrients, better to say, work in concert. So this means we need to get all of them in the recommended doses to have the right amount for the different functions of the vitamins as well as minerals. Now, how much should we get of the vitamins? Well, and I think there's a nutritional consensus with recommendations, and these recommendations are built on scientific evidence. I can take here the WHO recommendations. They say how much we should have as an intake of the macronutrients as well as of the micronutrients. And in my view, the macronutrient intake varies moderately, but we see if we have too much of the macronutrients, we see this in overweight and obesity. Interesting and important for this talk is that micronutrient intake, in my view, varies considerable. However, we cannot see the consequences. The consequences are hidden. So this is important to say, and for these reasons, we have so-called RDAs, recommended daily intakes of the vitamins, as well as for the minerals, in order to secure that people have the adequate amount for a healthy life. Now, if we have a deficiency in vitamins as well as minerals, we see what can happen to humans. Or think about vitamin C deficiency, which will result in scurvy. Think about beriberi in case of vitamin B1 deficiency, which was a major issue in the Asian countries in the last 2 centuries. Or think about vitamin B2 deficiency, which was resulting in cleft lips and palate. Think about vitamin B3 or deficiency, which is resulting in pellagra, or vitamin D deficiency, which is resulting in rickets. Think about vitamin A, which is resulting or can result in blindness and itchy skin. And last but not least, in this overview, I would like to show, yes, vitamin B9 or folate, a deficiency can result in neural tube defects and anemia. The good message is that we do not have so much deficiencies anymore. However, when we look the vitamins deficiency in the past and today, I would like to take the example of niacin, vitamin B3. This is out of a journal in the US. This was an issue in the US just 100 years ago. And you see on the slide the mortality risk just 100 years ago. And when they realized that this mortality is caused by a deficiency of niacin, they started first a voluntary enrichment and then later on the mandatory enrichment. And you see on the graph, the mortality risk immediately went down. And so many foods in the US as well in other countries are nowadays fortified with niacin in order to avoid this. Interesting. And let's take vitamin A. Vitamin A deficiency, I would say, is still an issue. Still around 190 million children are faced with vitamin A deficiency, with the consequences that about 250,000 and more children went every year into blindness, and half of them die even in the first 12 months. And I am looking forward to the talk of Professor Schweigert, who will talk about the example of vitamin A in more detail. I said already, the good message is that deficiencies are not so much an issue anymore. However, look on this slide. This is a recent publication just a couple of months ago, and they claim in this paper that they assess the micronutrient, the vitamin intake all over the world. And look on the details. What do they say? We realize that also nowadays, even in developed countries, in industrialized countries, many people do not meet recommendations. Look on here, vitamin E, for example, 4 billion do not meet recommendations. Vitamin B2, 4 billion do not meet recommendations. If you look on folate, again, 4 billion. If you look on vitamin C, 4 billion. Isn't this shocking? And this brings me to my concern, or what does this mean if people do not achieve the recommendations which are science-based, which are recommended by health authorities? What does this mean, and what is the impact on health, on life expectancy, on performance, well-being, and so on? Let's see, and my question is, what is the impact of this suboptimal intake? Or, I mentioned it already before, if we turn it around, what would be the benefit if people have an optimal nutrient intake and optimal nutrient status? And when we take about intake, I know that many papers, that many assessments are done via questionnaires. However, questionnaires have can have over and under reporting. So in my view, it is much better not to rely on intake data, however, to have status data. So status of nutrients, of vitamins measured in blood, because we have to differentiate between different population groups, between elderly and younger people, between people with a certain genetic setup, and last but not least, also with people who are on medication. And if we take this, and if we have starter, we take care of this, and we know what is the impact of the absorption in the gut of the individual, what is the handling in the body of the individual. And out of this, we have information of health effects, and for the individual as well for the medical doctor, this data can help to act and provide recommendations. So let me share two examples where I want to demonstrate and want to illustrate this. Let's start with vitamin D. Vitamin D is well known and already mentioned. That the classic role of vitamin D is bone mineral density, bone health. It is important for calcium absorption and deposition in the bones. It is necessary for these reasons to prevent rickets and in elderly osteomalacia and osteopenia. And there are a couple of additional benefits, and I would like also to hint to those. We know that vitamin D is related to muscle strength. Vitamin D, we have also seen this during the coronavirus pandemic, very much related to immunity, immune strength. Also, it has a benefit in cardiovascular health and in reducing some cancers. So let's move forward. And what is the impact on mineral density? We know that during aging, our bone mineral density is declining, and so we have to care that we keep up as much of the bone mineral density in order to avoid fractures and other issues. We are in a good situation because we can measure what is the individual status of a person on vitamin D. We have the so-called 25-hydroxyvitamin D level as a marker for the status of a person. And there are recommendations in place. If a person is below 25 nanomole, the person would be in the deficient range. If the person is in the range of 25 up to 50 nanomole, this is called insufficient. And a level 50 and above is quite often called adequate, especially for bone health. However, we know for the overall benefits of vitamin D, a status of 75 nanomole per liter is the optimal range. What does this mean? This is a paper which we published a while ago, and we analyzed all studies where the 25-hydroxyvitamin D level was measured. And you see on the top Europe, then you see the Americas, Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. And if we apply the cutoff points I mentioned before, so below 25 nanomole, we see, yes, there are some population groups below this range. If we take 50 nanomole as a cutoff point, yes, there are major population groups in this field. If we take 75 nanomole as cutoff, we realize, oh, there's only a part of the patient of the population in this optimal range. And if we would do a calculation and use this for the whole world, this would mean that about 88%, so nearly 90% of the population are below the optimal range. This is the reason why a lot of scientists engage. Here's a paper by Kevin Cashman and colleagues who even talked about vitamin D deficiency in Europe. Is it pandemic? And similar publications we find for other regions like the US and so on. So what is the impact? And this is from a publication by Heike Bischoff-Ferrari. She was analyzing what is the impact of the vitamin D status, 25-hydroxyvitamin D, on bone density, hip bone density in this case, in younger people. And you see that the best bone density is reached in the range of 75 nanomoles. And the same is true in older people. So when we look, muscle and bone loss is a major issue in the aging population. When we look what is the impact on the population, 3 women and 1 of 3 women and 1 of 5 men over the age of 50 years will have an osteoporotic fracture. And in women, the incidence of fracture is higher than the total incidence for cancer, heart infection, stroke, and diabetes, and so on. And when we look just on Germany as one example, there are currently about 5 million women and 1 million men aged over 50 who are at risk for osteoporosis. The question is, how can you achieve an intake or how can you achieve this 75 nanomole? And I have put here a couple of foods. Salmon is a good source for vitamin D, fortified milk. Margarine, not a very good source. Mushrooms, not a very good source. However, has some vitamin E. Eggs can be a source of vitamin D. So this demonstrates food sources are not a good source for vitamin D. When we are out in the sun, we can, just by being out in the sun for 15, 20 minutes, we can produce 10,000 and more international units in our body. However, we have to say this is only true in summertime. It does not work in wintertime in our regions. And you have also to say that, for example, in elderly, the production of vitamin D in the skin in individuals is very much reduced. Now, moving forward, I said we should not only look on musculoskeletal strengths of vitamin D or the impact on this vitamin D. There are large studies which demonstrate additional benefits, and I would like to hint to the VITAL study, a study in the US, which was an intervention with 2,000 international units vitamin D and 1,000 milligram omegas, and the Do Health study here in Europe. And this study showed, yes, the intervention in healthy people, in elderly people, I have to say, resulted in a reduction of severe cancer cases in the range of 13%, in a reduction of cancer mortality by 12%, in a reduction of autoimmune diseases in the range of 40%. So saying, yes, there are a number of benefits of an optimal level or optimal status of vitamin D. Also, I would like to mention this study. This is from Hermann Brenner from the German Cancer Institute. He has a cohort in Germany, about 10,000 people, where he is measuring, or where he has measured the vitamin D levels, and he is then differentiating between those who are below 30 nanomoles, those who are between 30 and 50 nanomoles, and who are below. And then he is assessing what is the all-cause mortality in this people compared to those who are low in vitamin D versus those who are above 50 nanomole. And you can see that those who have the optimal level have a much lower risk. And you can, he analyzed also what is the impact on cardiovascular disease, on cancer risk, as well as on respiratory diseases. And you see, wow, those who have an optimal level on vitamin D have a major benefit or lower risk for these diseases. So he is saying, given the safety and the benefits of vitamin D, supplementation calls for immediate action. Let's move forward to the next example. And this is about vitamin E, a similar approach. What is the role of vitamin E? It is an antioxidant, and there are a number of publications which support the benefit of vitamin E at a level, at serum concentration in the range of 30 micromole. And here's a similar analysis. Well, we know that 12 micromole is the cut-off point for deficiency. 30 micromole would be then the cut-off point for optimal level. And you can see again that a major part of the population in the different regions in Asia, Americas, Europe, and so on, is not in the optimal range. There are additional benefits at higher levels. And when we analyze this, we see, yes, health benefits in the optimal range is a decreased risk for non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular, diabetes, and so on. And the high level is impacting immune health and. Again, the question is, how can you achieve an intake? And this is not vitamin D, this is vitamin E. It must be vitamin E. And you can see if you take a salad with sunflower oil, eat some almonds, hazelnuts, avocados, and so on, you can achieve an intake of 12 to 15 milligram of vitamin E. Here are the benefits, and I would like to focus on one. This is the impact on cardiovascular disease, and you see on this slide that on the status of vitamin E, the risk for mortality on cardiovascular disease is decreasing. There is an inverse correlation with ischemic heart disease. I would like to also mention a recent study which was published by Simin Medani, and she was giving a group of elderly people in a nursing home 200 international units vitamin E next to the multivitamin application. And you see the impact is that risk reduction for respiratory infections 35%, upper respiratory tract infections 38%, and common cold 37%. So my summary is optimal intake of vitamins and status contributes to a healthy life. Vitamins are essential. There's a nutritional consensus for dietary recommendation based on scientific evidence. However, many people do not have an optimal intake, and there should be, let me say, education about the benefits of optimal intake. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I close. I say thank you very much, and I would like to hand over to our next speaker, who is Professor Florian Schweigert. He is an international recognized scientist in the field of human, and I can say animal nutrition, and great is he's also an entrepreneur. He started in Munich and then was a professor at the university in Leipzig and moved then forward to the university in Potsdam. And when I look on his scientific work, I think he has more than 250 scientific publications in journals and great, as I mentioned also, that he is very much engaged in the translation of science. So he has founded two companies. One of them is BioAnalyte, the other one is Quimpart. And in these companies, they are developing innovative testing systems for the food and for the feed industry. And with this short introduction, Florian, I hand over to you.
Well, I'm opening my presentation, but it's the wrong one. Sorry, it's wait a second. We tested it, it worked, and now I have to find. So thank you very much, Manfred Eggersdorfer, for this kind introduction. And I'm representing this in my background as having been professor at the University of Potsdam. But as Manfred Eggersdorfer mentioned already, and this is basically my conflict of interest, I'm working for BioAnalyte and for Q-Impact, which are heavily involved in the question of how to fight malnutrition in the global south. And I'm very much delighted to give a presentation where I would like to open the window into an area where vitamin deficiency is still a major and sustainable and since a very long time existing challenge for developing of individuals and for developing countries. And therefore, I would like to have a global view on challenges, intervention, and future directions, which we can use and approach to fight vitamin A deficiency in the global south. Well, Professor Eggersdorfer was already mentioning that it is indeed a question of quantity. It is affecting millions of people. 1 out of 3 children under 5 years of age are globally affected with vitamin A deficiency. It's a major cause of it's a major cause of preventable child blindness. It's linked to immune weaknesses in early childhood, mortality. All this is linked in together. And importantly, it's preventable, it's treatable. Therefore, there should be actually no reason why it is existing, but there are many reasons why it is still existing. I would embark a little bit first on the question of language and terminology. If we talk about vitamin A deficiency, we have to be sure and we have to be clear, we are talking about an umbrella term, which is considering different forms of vitamin A. Transport in blood is retinol, storage form of vitamin A is a palmitate. Then we have this metabolites of retinol and cis and transretinol, which plays a major role in vision. And lastly, we have retinoic acid, which is important in the gene expression of the system. However, we also have a provitamin A. And if you read labeling on bottles and food, you always talk about vitamin A, but in many cases behind this is provitamin A, it's beta-carotene. And on the red line dots, you can see that with enzymatic cleavage, centrally or excentrally, you can produce in a theoretical maximum 2 molecules of vitamin A if you take up beta-carotene through your diet, or you can create retinol and certain apocarotenes in this metabolism. Importantly, the question is, people through the diet either get it through animal products, which is vitamin A, or they get it through plant products, which is basically carotenoids, which can be converted into vitamin A. Vitamin A has a very central role in the body. It is, we all know it, blindness due to vitamin A deficiency. So it has a very specific role in vision, especially in night vision. It is affecting immunity in infection resistance. It has a great impact on cellular growth and repair, reproductive health, and bone metabolism. How does it function? What is the actual molecular mechanism behind it? In the vision section on the left side, you can see retinol is a central molecule. It is converted in the reception structures of the eye from retinol cis into trans isomerization. And this causes the transduction of the signal, and this causes this is responsible for the ability that we are able to see what we are looking at and recognizing it. On the other hand, vitamin A is functioning like a hormone. Vitamin D is also regarded as a hormone, and this means it is affecting gene expression on the right side. The immune function, the differentiation, and reproduction are going along the line of the transcriptional process of retinoic acid. It interacts with specific binding sites. These binding sites are then approaching the DNA, and then they are starting in the nucleus to start the transcription and then affecting these different functions in the body. So you have to understand that there are very crucial steps in vitamin A metabolism affecting our body. What is the problem we have? We have 350 million or more people, over 190 million preschool children, and Manfred Eggersdorfer was already making this number, so I'm not going into detail. It's also an important issue in pregnant women. And we have, and we will come back later to this, especially not only age and sex-related, gender-related issues, but also communities in vulnerable settings, low resource settings in developing countries. We have children which have autistic diseases which are affecting the uptake, and we have many gastrointestinal conditions, inflammation of the gastrointestinal tract, and so on and so on. They are all affecting or have a direct or indirect effect on the situation of the ability and availability of vitamin A to the body through the diet. If you look at the map, we have seen many of these heat maps in the talk before. you can see the most darkest greenest area, we have severe vitamin A deficiencies. And you can see it's the same belt where we have micronutrients deficiency. Globally, it is in the sub-Saharan Africa area. It goes further down to India and other countries in the Asian continent and South America and Middle America. You have also substantial situations of vitamin A deficiencies. In the industrialized countries, this deficiency is not very visible. However, there are also populations in which the supplementation might result in certain deficiencies. The challenge basically is it's not a question of input, simply to say here it is what you, here is the food you have and this will supply you. There are, if we talk about vitamin and mineral deficiencies in the impact in people, there are underlying causes, there are intermediate causes, and this together then balances up to the actual situation of deficiency. Low content and density of vitamin A in food is an underlying cause. Inadequate care of mothers and children, the whole public health issue is playing in there. Lack of access to health services, clean water, good sanitation, diarrheas and stuff like this is affecting absorption and availability of the nutrient. Disease that causes losses, inflammation, for example, or increased need for vitamins and minerals, gastrointestinal tract diseases or inflammations, or inadequate intake of vitamins and minerals. That's basically supplementation then, and other areas where you get it from. This augments lately that to the final situation, how vitamins are, what extent the vitamin A deficiency is existing. What signs do we see in vitamin A deficiency? We all know this. This is a very historical knowledge on this. It's night blindness, it's xerophthalmia, changes first in the night blindness. You don't see too much changes on the outer eye. Then you get the bitoid spots. Then you see these xerophthalmia, and this is a clear functional and diagnostic indicator of vitamin A deficiency. Those which you don't see clearly at this point is immune function, incidence, severity of infection, mortality, diarrhea, measles, respiratory illnesses. All this attributes to this. And if you look at the right side, you can see that mortality, cumulative mortality in measles programs and in other in the general incidences decreases in population where you have a vitamin A supplementation program. So you can clearly show that if you introduce vitamin A in this population at risk, you can clearly reduce mortality and morbidity for specific incidences in these population. You have a huge impact of differentiation, skin, hyperkeratosis, integrity. Some retinoid products, certain as a therapy, are used in also skin differentiation diseases like psoriasis and other skin diseases. They are discussed and they are found to be helpful in this area. And lastly, you have this reproduction effect, germ cell maturation, abortion, and birth defects. And interestingly, if you look at this, and we will come later on it, both vitamin A deficiency on one hand, on vitamin oversupplementation, intoxication, are running in a similar picture on the effect of the body. So how do we diagnose? A very classical approach is to test for night blindness, dark adaptation test, night vision threshold test, and there's a nice picture on the bottom. If you have nothing available to test, you have you build up a tent, you make it very dark, you put a very faint light into it, and you put a cookie in there. And then you guide the kid into this tent. If the kid is not recognizing the cookie, then you will give the kid, when it leaves, a cookie which is enriched with vitamin A, so you can supplement the kid. Those kids which are seeing the cookies, they can fetch the cookie which is in and is not supplemented. That's a very simple one. Nowadays, these diagnostic assets are more sophisticated, but you have to consider in certain areas, simple solutions are on demand. The challenge is Professor Eggersdorfer was talking about what are biomarkers, what blood levels can we look at. And with blood levels and vitamin A, you are running into some issues, because if you look, if serum levels are beyond 0.7 micromole per liter, we are talking about a deficiency in vitamin A. If you look on the right-hand side of the slide, you see the plasma concentration. Sorry for this German slide. The plasma concentration increases on deficiency. From the left, it's deficient, increases. When you supplement the individual, the level increase, and then it plateaus. So you don't know what is the actual status of the person. You only can say it's more or less in yes and no answer, whether a person is insufficient or a person has sufficient vitamin A. You don't know what is the storage, because the storage is the liver, and the liver storage increases independence of the vitamin status of the individual until there is reached a certain threshold, and then blood levels increase again, being then an indicator of intoxication. But that's a long way to go. Because vitamin A measurements are complicated, we have developed methods to do so. There have to be surrogate markers, proxy markers, which is the carrier protein for retinol, the retinol binding protein, which is to some extent which is reliable, and you can have an immunoassay to do so. The problem is retinol tests, retinol binding protein tests can be misleading, because retinol binding protein and retinol is attached to retinol binding protein into 1:1 molar ratio, because it's a lipid, it needs to be a protein to be transported in blood. And the retinol binding protein is an acute phase protein. That means if you have an inflammation, retinol blood levels drop automatically as a consequence of the inflammation. And then in population which have a high pressure of inflammation, you might overestimate the percentage of people which are suffering from a vitamin A deficiency. So that's a big challenge in those communities at risk to identify and dissect inflammation from vitamin A deficiency. So there is challenges. That there are challenges in the diagnostic. We have no global standards for different cutoff levels. They are on its way. These approaches, we have very different, quite different country level definitions. We have in the low and middle income countries, the LMECs, we have not very fresh data. The data are quite old, and because the resource limitation there, it's quite difficult to track what is happening in real time. In many cases, data sets we have are many, many years old and are not really reflecting the real issues. So there are many challenges which we have to address to improve this. I would jump one step back on this and show you this slide. It is the normal function of body in the normal supplementation of vitamin A. That's the middle. Then you go in the overtoxication, which ends with the death of the individual. On the left-hand side, you go into the deficiency, which also causes the death of a person. And you can see that symptoms of deficiency, night blindness, keratinization of epithelial tissues and blindness, or in the area of chronic changes and acute changes and malfunction are quite similar or have a lot of similarities between intoxication, toxication at high levels and decreased levels in deficiencies. There are also discussion whether there are chronic oversupplementation. If you go beyond 3,000, there are reports and studies showing that the hip fracture rate and bone fracture rate is increasing in vitamin A supplementation. What approaches do we have to come to the question, what can we do about it? In those countries, we have 4 key approaches, basically. And these approaches are really addressing different settings and they need to be carefully adjusted, as you will see later. Supplementation, to have a high dose of vitamin A, which you give to an individual in a capsular or another form. Then you have education and food-based approaches, which are summarized under dietary diversification. You have fortification and you have biofortification as intervention strategies. Supplementation and coverage trends are the approach when you have populations at high risk, when the population is clearly defined. You can go in with capsules of vitamin A, give it to the children. Here you can see a little child getting it. It reduces all-cause mortality by 12 to 24%, depending on the original situation. It's routine delivery, it's campaign delivery, so it is dependent on vaccination programs and certain medical spots. We had a sharp drop on this with COVID-19. Only 60% of target children were reached in 2022, and highest gaps in mortality in high mortality countries. That means the bigger the challenge in the whole country setting, the bigger the problem is in this supplementation. If we go into dietary diversification, we have to realize it's a local. However, if it's successful, it's a sustainable solution. As a solution, we can promote intake of liver as a very rich source of vitamin A, eggs, carrots, greeny leaves, adaptive agriculture and food systems. But you have to always keep in mind, this takes a long time. It requires nutrition education. It needs to address food insecurity, poor feeding practices. It addresses limited seasonal availability as limiting aspects. So that is not as it's not a straightforward approach. It needs time. Then food fortification. There are currently large programs, also heavily supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which are trying to reach 1 billion people with supplemented large-scale fortified food. That means the addition of vitamins and minerals, and in this case, we're talking about vitamin A, to specific basic food like oil, sugar-coated, flour, or condominiums or other things can be enriched. It needs regulatory oversight and quality control. It's scalable, especially in urban populations. And on the right-hand side, you can see from Indonesia, that's palm oil enriched with vitamin A. So to guarantee to give the population in need, you can see the little logo of the IH logo with some vitamin A on the bottles. That gives the people the assurance that this oil is enriched with vitamin A and supports the health. Challenges are rural areas are more challenging to reach. The implementation costs are varying depending on how you do it. Sugar is a little bit more technical, complicated than oil. And there are challenges how governments, whether it's mandatory or voluntary, are able to enforce these regulatory efforts of governments. Then we have biofortification, we have genetic engineering. Here on the left side, you see different forms and different breeds of yellow rice, the golden rice project from the Agenda. You can see here the rice kernels are converted, are now yellowish and orange. They are very rich in carotenoids and provitamin A, but they have challenges in population. For example, there were tries to mix rice with enriched yellow rice, and the women in charge of cooking were picking out the yellow one, giving it to the chicken, and eating only the white rice, because the expectancy in population is rice needs to be white and not yellow. There must be something wrong with yellow rice. We have, which is more breeding. This is not genetically engineered. This is yellow cassava. Nigeria has a huge project in yellow cassava for supplementation of populations with good success. And for example, corn is enriched with carotenoids, or banana. There are many, many approaches now to try to enrich local staple food with carotenoids, but also with other micronutrients in deficiency to improve the nutrition situation in population. There is no single approach to it. It's always an integrated approach which works best. You can see here combined supplementation, fortification, dietary diversification, biofortification, public health measurements have to work together. It's not, the years are not exactly how it would go, but I would like to show you. You start with a supplementation because there you can have the impact immediately. Public health measurement need a longer time to adjust. Fortification, the red line, also has a quite long lag period, which needs to be the installation in the legislatory business, and dietary improvement is a long-term goal. And at the end, we are hoping that we are sometimes reaching the point where dietary is sufficient enough to cover most of the needs of this population, but the way to this is still a challenge. We need to strengthen, coming to the end, we need to strengthen the health system. And basically, we have to integrate vitamin E supplementation in routine child health services, immunization days, health weeks. This can be done. Frontline health workers needs to deliver this. There are many of these approaches. I'm not saying there's nothing happening. It's simply to see where the approaches are. We need much better data system. The data system, real-time monitoring is a challenge, but with the technology we have at the moment, with data handling we have at the moment, we are very close to points where real-time monitoring is very close. We are working on real-time monitoring of vitamin A enrichment in oil in Pakistan, and we can say that we are reaching 100 million people at a certain point of time, bringing all data together. We need to expand digital health tools, what I have mentioned, and we also promote community-based reporting and follow-up for missed population in these studies. We need a cross-sectional alignment, and we need enforcement of mandatory. This is a long and sometimes tedious process to do so. We need other ways to approach population to make them realize how important this supplementation and this large-scale food fortification is. We need incentivation for food industry for compliance, because food industry is sometimes not the producers of oil. The stability is a challenge, and many of these things are challenging. We need promotion of this, and we have to align diagnostic criteria to global standards and to improve targeting. So my last slide gives you what is the essential to carry home. Vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin for maintaining multiple biological purposes. It must be taken up with the diet. There's no sun which helps you, but the source and the food matrix can heavily affect, and that's true for all other nutrients as well, bioavailability. The body is a rich store of vitamin A, so you can carry a lot for many years vitamin A stores with you without taking up anything. The liver is substantial in this time, but the capacity is at what point limited. If this is overused, then you have also intoxication problems. Insufficient dietary vitamin A intake has severe health consequences, and vitamin A insufficiency can be overcome by dietary intervention and food fortification. Thank you very much for your attention.
Professor Schweigert, thank you so much to you. I think it was great what you presented about vitamin A deficiency and how you can overcome this. And I think we will come back to this later on in the questionnaire. And I would like to introduce Professor Stephan Bakker as next speaker. Who is Stephan Bakker? He's a medical doctor, and I'm very happy that we have a medical doctor also in this webinar, because we know that patients quite often are low in micronutrients, and especially when they have undergone medical treatment, that this may impact vitamin status and mineral status. Professor Bakker studied medicine, as already mentioned. He is a registered internist. He was working at the university in Amsterdam, and in 1999, I think, he joined the University Medical Center in Groningen, where he is a full professor. His research is focusing on the potentially modifiable factors which influence renal outcomes, which influences the development of cardiovascular disease, the quality of life in kidney transplant recipients, and. So he has a very rich, I say, cohort where he can really study what is the status and what patients require on micronutrients. I also would like to mention he is, I say, successful. I think he educated more than 70 PhD students, and he is co-author of more than 1,000 publications. Professor Bakker, we are now curious to learn and hear from you what is the micronutrient impact in patients.
Thank you, Professor Eggersdorfer. I'll first start sharing my screen. Well, I will talk about vitamin deficiency in patients, and particularly, of course, because I'm a nephrologist in patients with chronic kidney disease. And this is particularly interesting in the setting of water-soluble vitamin deficiencies, because substances which are water-soluble will be cleared by the kidney more vigorously if kidney function is normal, and less well if kidney function is poor. So you would expect high value with the same intake. You would in fact expect high values in patients with chronic kidney disease, and I spent some time in investigating that. So I looked at thiamine, B6, B12, also at 125 hydroxyvitamin D, because this is also water soluble, and in vitamin B3 and vitamin C. And I want to talk now about my findings in vitamin B3 and niacin, because they are interesting in assessing the status of these patients, and some insights therein also that it is completely different in patients than in the normal population if you are going to look through those eyes. So niacin, it's involved in energy metabolism. It protects against oxidative stress. It's involved in aging, and we have talked about it, the syndrome of pellagra. We started assessing NADH status according to the WHO formulation. And this is the primary thing by which you can assess it is by urinary excretion of N1-methylnicotinamide in 24-hour urine, or the ratio, but we started to assess it as the N1-methylnicotinamide excretion. Why were we interested in this? That was not because of niacin primarily, but because we were interested in the pathway of conversion of tryptophan to niacin in the end, and the involvement of inflammation therein. But we were assessing these metabolites, and in the end, the end metabolite. And then we run into these data. You can see here kidney donors and kidney transplant recipients listed alongside of each other. They have roughly the same age, somewhat more males in the kidney transplant recipients, but you have to look at intake niacin equivalents by food frequency questionnaire. They were roughly similar in the donors and the recipients. And the tryptophan intake, which is also converted to niacin, is also roughly similar. And the niacin intake, it's somewhat lower in the recipients, but not really much lower. And what was much lower was the N1-methylnicotinamide excretion. It was nearly halved in the kidney transplant recipients. So we were wondering, how can this be? And you have to see kidney function in potential kidney donors before donation. They are healthy subjects. They have a normal kidney function, and kidney transplant recipients have only one kidney. So then it is somewhat more than half of normal, because there is compensatory hypertrophy of the transplanted kidney. So it's much lower, but for kidney transplant recipients, this is a nice kidney function. And you see that the patients use a lot of more drugs than the donors. Then we looked at potential determinants of N1-NM excretion, and of course we expected that niacin intake would be related and tryptophan intake would be related, but it wasn't. Vitamin B6 was related, and that's because it's in all kinds of conversion steps from tryptophan to niacin. It's involved in many enzymes, so probably this is stimulating the conversion to niacin. And interestingly, EGFR creatinine was positively associated. So the better the kidney function, the higher the excretion, that it was independent of intake. We also looked whether the N1-MN excretion had impact for the prognosis of the patients. Was this something to look at in the perspective of supplementation? This is, of course, observational data, but you can see that it is highly predictive of mortality in these patients. So, like in the patients that were in Mississippi, that should be supplemented because they had pellagra, and that the mortality would become lower. This is also would be something for our patients, because the low excretion is really associated with mortality. Higher excretion is protective. That's because the hazard ratio is below 1. So it's really an issue in these patients. And we therefore further dived into this metabolism, and you should realize the N1-NM is not an end metabolite. So NADA is converted to nicotinamide, and then it's converted to N1-MN, and then you have N-methyl-2-pyroxy pyridone 5-carboxamide, shortly abbreviated to 2-PI, and that's by aldehyde oxidase in the liver. It's converted, so it can be converted further, and we started measuring this 2-PI too. So then we looked at the kidney donors and recipients again, and you can see that the N1-MN is, of course, the same data as that I showed before, and the 2-PI is the opposite. It's the higher abundant mass, but it is much lower in the kidney donors, whereas the N1-N is higher, and the opposite in the kidney transplant recipients, of course. And here you can see that the sum of 2-PI and N1-MN is similar in the kidney transplant recipients and the kidney donors. So the total intake in kidney transplant recipients is apparently quite normal if you look at the total metabolites. And we looked again at independent, we look now at independent determinants of this ratio, and then you can see that there is some influence, seems some influence of nutrition, but it's gone if you do it in a multivariable analysis. And then you can see that kidney function is the main determinant of the ratio. So apparently, in the circulation, concentrations of N1-MN can increase, and the enzyme aldehyde oxidase gets more time to convert to 2-PI in case of poor renal function. So if you have a poor renal function, the recommendation of the WHO to assess N1-MN as a marker of niacin availability doesn't apply. You should then measure the combination, and in fact you shouldn't take the ratio, but you should add them up to come up to the real intake. We also looked at prognosis, and this is the tertiles for the patients according to the sum of this excretion. And then you can see that age is a little bit of influence. And of course, the bigger the patients, the stronger the association. So if you are big, then you take more in. That's the main thing on this slide. And we looked at mortality, and you can see that the combination of the both is also predictive of mortality. So a low intake is going with a less well survival in the patient. So it still applies that if intake is low, then it would be better to supplement the niacin in these patients. And we looked at the association with mortality of the combination of both, and that was still the same as N1-MN itself. Interestingly, there is also the effect is modified by inflammation. So we looked at C-reactive protein as a marker of inflammation, and the association was only very significant if you had no signs of inflammation. So if there is flux through this pathway of tryptophan is converted, then it's something different. And you can see that the association was mainly present for infectious disease mortality. Other causes of mortality were not so much associated. So it's really affecting the immune system. And this is when we look at FFQ data and food frequency data and the marker data. And here you can see that the associations for the food frequency questionnaire were somewhat similar as to the N1-MN excretion and also the combination of the two markers. But of course, there is much more noise in the food frequency questionnaire data. So the confidence intervals are much wider. It's more appropriate to assess status by intake markers. So the conclusion is that N1-MN excretion as marker of NADH is advocated by WHO and strongly influenced by renal function. And N1-MN, 2PI and N1-MN should be the alternative marker in case of poor kidney function. And the associations with mortality suggest that it is important in these patients to supplement it. Now, for another part about vitamin C, but I am seeing that time is running out. Shall I proceed with vitamin C or leave it at this place?
Stephan, if you can give us a short introduction, I think vitamin C is also important and interesting. Please show us your insights.
Vitamin C, it's water-soluble, small molecular, and the body cannot produce it. So what will happen if kidney function goes down and the intake remains the same? You would expect that it will rise the concentration. It's not true. This is an old cohort on which we published, and we found that eGFR, so kidney function, the higher the kidney function, the higher the concentration rather than the lower the concentration. So in this situation, we didn't have intake data on vitamin C, but it was completely opposite to what you would expect. And I pursued this later on in a newer cohort. So we have recently published on it in European Journal of Nutrition. And we had 2 cohorts in which we analyzed, and we found that vitamin C concentrations were, so we divided in plasma vitamin C concentrations below the normal cutoff and above the normal cutoff, and you can see that it is associated with age. Of course, the higher the age, the more the patients, this is kidney transplant recipients again, I should remind. And again, the higher the kidney function, the better the kidney function, the higher the vitamin C concentration. So we repeated this finding. This is to show you that vitamin C intake and vitamin C supplementation are really influencing the vitamin C status. So if you have a high intake or supplement, then you have higher concentrations, irrespective of your kidney function, I can tell you. This is, again, compared to donors. And you can see donors with a good kidney function have always a higher vitamin C concentration than recipients. So these have a poor kidney function, these have a good kidney function, and still they have a higher concentration of vitamin C. And here you can see the prevalence of vitamin C deficiency according to a concentration lower than 28. And you can see that in the potential kidney donors with normal kidney function, the percentage of deficiency was really lower than in the patients. So opposite to what you would have expected from the effect of kidney function with similar intake. We looked at determinants of vitamin C deficiency, and you would see the usual suspects. So diabetes is a real, so oxidative stress things are related like you would expect, but kidney function independently, oppositely. So the better the kidney function, the lower the chance of a low vitamin C status. And that was independent of vitamin C intake. You can see here the vitamin C intake, supplementation, high intake and supplementation were independent determinants, of course, of vitamin C status, highly protective, but kidney function was related independently and positively. Better the kidney function, the higher the vitamin C status. And I've been thinking a lot about this, how this can be. And then I ran into a publication in which they made rats vitamin C deficient. The adrenal glands contain a lot of ascorbic acids, and they wanted to get rid of this, and they injected benzoic acid intraperitoneally. And then they got them vitamin C deficient. And from food chemistry, it's known that vitamin C and benzoic acid can react to benzene. But it is said that it is not running this reaction in the human body. But if it's running in rats, why wouldn't it run in humans, particularly if you have poor kidney function and probably higher concentrations of benzoic acid now and then? And yeah, we take in a lot of benzoic acid. It's used as a universal food preservative. So it's something that is a marker of how do you call it? Ultra-processed foods. So I think with ingestion of ultra-processed foods, we are exposing ourselves to to benzoic acid. And if you have a poor kidney function, concentration can apparently rise so much that it is reacting with vitamin C to form benzene. And benzene, of course, we know this, well, it's highly toxic. So I think we have something here. If you are a patient, you have a poor kidney function, we should be careful to supplement vitamin C without looking further than our nose is long. And the same is true for several other water-soluble vitamins. So unexpectedly, vitamin C does not rise with declining kidney function. Possibly, I don't know whether it's for sure, but it's a hypothesis that it reacts with benzoic acid to form benzene. And yeah, benzene toxicity could explain a lot about so-called uremic syndrome. This is one of the publications that I want to make in the issue that you are hosting, Manfred. This was my end.
Excellent, Professor Bakker. Thank you so much. I think it was important that we have also you on board for this webinar, because you as medical doctor are really caring what is the situation in patients concerning micronutrients and vitamins. And I think you demonstrated really very impactful how you care and what are the different impacts. Now, We have a couple of questions, and I would like to start with one question, and I think this question is to Professor Schweigert, and this is, what about vitamin A supplementation in chronic kidney disease patients? Can you comment on this topic?
It's a nice question, which we can share maybe in this issue. Well, there is a lot of debate about vitamin. I mean, you have to realize that two major organs which are related to the metabolism of vitamin A. That's the storage organ liver, and this is the kidney. The kidney has an important function of degrading, excreting, and then reabsorption, and then degrading retinol binding protein. That is affecting. If this is disturbed, as in chronic kidney disease, the levels of retinol binding protein in blood plasma increase, also metabolites increase, and so on. And so in chronic kidney disease, in general, you have higher retinol binding protein and higher vitamin A levels. So the question is still an issue that this might have a more, which might put kidney patients to a more higher risk of intoxication. There's very little evidence studies, I would say so. I'm not deeply into this. We have done this 10 years ago. However, I would say one should not, I mean, that's a careful judgment, not supplement. If so, simply adjust the diet in a moderate way and not do additional high level supplementation of vitamin A in chronic kidney diseases. Everything where the kidney is affected, you have a risk that levels increase and causes some kind of different levels of intoxication. That's the answer at this point. Be careful.
Yes, thank you so much. I think this was very helpful. Next question is going to Professor Bakker. The question is a higher vitamin C level in the blood associated with better immune function?
I think so, yes. A low vitamin C is extremely important for the function of white blood cells. And vitamin C concentrations are intercellularly usually high. So it must be important. But on the other hand, if it's too high and being converted to toxic metabolites, that wouldn't be good. But there is no research in that field to date. I think it would be a very important research area.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Bakker. There's one question to me, and this question is about what is the impact of a too high intake of vitamin D? Let me say the following. Is for some of the vitamins where a higher intake may have risks, there are upper limits defined, and for vitamin D, this upper limit is defined for 4,000 international units. This means if you take up to 4,000 international units every day of vitamin D, this is safe. I know that in special cases, medical doctors recommend higher doses. I think this is then under medical advice and medical observation. In these cases, it is different. Otherwise, 4,000 international units are the same, or up to 4,000 units is the same level. Another question is, what is the recommendation for vitamin D and vitamin E? And let me phrase it in this way. I know recommendations from nutrition societies is 600 to 800 international units per person and day. Elderly should take higher doses because vitamin D synthesis in the skin is reduced. I would like to quote Professor Heike Bischoff-Ferrari, which said in a presentation just recently, she has demonstrated in this intervention study to health that 2,000 international units provide benefits, additional benefits in the intervention group. So saying this is my recommendation for vitamin D. What about vitamin E? Vitamin E recommendation here in Europe is in the range of 12 milligrams. In the US is 50 milligrams. I have seen that with a good and a balanced diet, you can achieve this 12 to 50 milligrams. Otherwise, I recommend to take a supplement, and the supplement cares that the nutritional gap is filled. We have another question. And the other question is about vitamin B12 supplementation in vegans. And this listener is saying, is there a risk of high plasma B12 levels for lung cancer? Who can answer this? Is this
I did some research on
recognized?
vitamin B12 and had a publication on it which made a lot of noise around it, because we showed that high concentrations of vitamin B12 in the circulation are predictive of mortality, which is not indicative of causality, of course. But I don't think one of the questions was whether it could cause lung cancer. I don't think it's able to cause lung cancer, but I think people are saying that vitamin B12 is harmless, and that I doubt about, because or completely harmless, and that's because nearly all associations of nutrients with outcome are U-shaped, and you can think of vitamin B12 as in a similar way as iron and vitamin A, for instance. If you have inflammation, then binding proteins are upregulated and you have higher concentrations. You can have higher concentrations in circulation, but why would this binding protein be upregulated? Probably it's because it's also a growth factor for bacteria. So if you look from to a teleological perspective, it's probably the binding proteins go up to have low free vitamin B12 and free iron concentrations to prevent sepsis and those kind of things. So I think very high vitamin B12 supplementation would not be a good thing. It's also, you can see that it's a growth factor for bacteria, because the main acknowledged side effect of high doses of vitamin B12 is acne. So propionium bacterium acne is apparently growing better if there is a lot of vitamin B12. And you can imagine that other bacteria that need B12 to grow can also better grow, and you can become more easily septic.
Wow, thank you very much for this answer. I see we have a lot of more questions. However, we are already over time, and I think we will try to feed back to the listeners with the additional questions. We will try to provide you the feedback. I would like, because we are already over time, to thank the speakers. I think we made a great journey. We saw that in developing countries, many people have an inadequate intake and status on vitamins. We saw by Professor Schweigert that especially in developing countries, there is still vitamin deficiency is the case, especially vitamin A deficiency. And he demonstrated also what can be done to overcome this. And last but not least, Professor Bakker gave us examples. What is the impact in patients? And I was very happy to see that Professor Bakker, as a medical doctor, cares what is the impact of micronutrients for patients. So in this way, thank you so much to the speakers. Thank you so much also to our listeners. And whenever you have questions, please address us. Please address Professor Schweigert, Professor Bakker, or me. Thank you so much. there are a couple of more good questions, or
Yeah, that's it.
it would be great if you can provide answers to these individuals. I think we should try to feedback to them.
Yes, if you want, I can copy them and send them to you for you to give your feedback on them.
Perfect. This sounds good to me. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Once more, I repeat what I said. I think it was a good mix of different topics. So, as I said, on one hand side, what do we face here in the developing world? Florian, you really addressed still the major issue of vitamin A deficiency in developing countries. And it is amazing. On one hand side, we know the solution. However, it seems to be difficult to reach all people with these solutions.
That's true, but let's face it, we know all solutions for us individually as well. It's difficult for us individually to reach our solutions. Yeah. So why should it be in the complex organism of a society less complicated than in the complex minds of us?
Right. This is a good answer, I think. So we have always to challenge ourselves as well as the society and engage. I think this is also an important message out of this webinar and the lectures, or that we have to engage and talk about the role of vitamins and or micronutrients in general for health and well-being, or that people are aware. And Stephan, I look to you, because I think in the medical community, quite often the role of micronutrients for health is not so prominent positioned. However, I think at your university, it's really a key topic. Or you always look what you can do and what are interactions, or what do patients miss on nutrients.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important topic in our university. So we are, and happy that you are collaborating with us for such a long time already. Yeah. That's
Perfect.
very inspiring, Manfred. You have been an inspiration for many, much of our research.
Good to hear, Stephan. Perfect.
Yeah.
So I look to my colleagues, from the nutrient organization. Any comments from your side?
From my side, this is a great opportunity to have like you as great experts in these topics to talk to a quite decent audience, I would say. It's true that in the beginning there were like not that many questions, and then people have started like making them, so it's been quite fine. You've been managing the times super nice as a chair, so thanks a lot for your assistance. It's true that with introductions and so on for the speakers, we've been like roughly like maybe 5 minutes late, something like this. But it's been super nice to have the chance to have you as speakers today. Very interesting topics, and well, looking forward to seeing what comes out of this special issue that for sure will be very, very interesting. And well, if you would like to like host any other kind of webinar like this, would be really, really nice. So that's it from my side, at least. I don't know if Ashma or any other like organizer wants to add anything.
All right, so I think the presentations by everyone was actually really, really insightful. So for me, it's like, because my field of study in university is completely different. I study economics. So like being absorbed into the world of science is like a completely different universe, you can say. Yeah, but it was very insightful. I feel like I've learned some new things. And I'm very happy that we got a whole list of questions, which we have actually screenshotted. So don't worry about them. We can just copy and paste and send it over to you guys for you if you want to answer them. Yeah.
Perfect. Yes.
But also thank you so much for sharing. I was just telling Inigo,
Okay.
that your enthusiasm is really felt through the screens, you know.
Excellent. Good to hear. So once more, Florian, once more, Stephan, thank you so much. I think it was great to have this webinar. With
Yeah,
this,
thank you for the
have a nice,
Thank you
invitation.
for
have a
giving
nice
the
day.
initial, thank you for giving the initial thought
Yeah.
and stuff. Starting point. Thank you, Manfred. Yeah, thank you. Thank you to all.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. Yeah. Bye-bye together.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.